Honey, can I ask you something? Becky's voice was calm, almost too calm. I sensed something beneath the surface, something waiting to unravel. I looked up from the television, trying to gauge her expression. Of course, babe. What's on your mind? She paused, biting her lip before her next words. How would you feel if I went on a date with another man? The words hit me like a brick. I forced a smile, my mind racing. Is this about the porn? Has she found something? Why would you ask that? I tried to keep my tone light, but inside, my pulse quickened. Becky sighed. Sally told me about Greg. He asked her to sleep with someone else, and he wanted to watch. She met my eyes, searching for a reaction. And it made me wonder. My throat tightened. This was no joke. I felt a strange mix of emotions, confusion, jealousy, but arousal? I leaned forward. Greg's never mentioned that. But if you're asking if some men find that idea exciting, then yeah, I suppose. Her eyes narrowed. Does it excite you, Steve? The idea of me with someone else? The air between us thickened. I nodded slowly, trying to be honest. Yeah, I guess it does. Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. Then you don't love me. You want me to be with someone else? Becky, no. I grabbed her hands. I love you. I love you so much. But I hesitated, searching for the right words. It's not about wanting you to be with someone else. It's more about the idea that another man finds you desirable. Her tears spilled over, and I felt my heart breaking. I could never be okay with you being with another woman, she whispered. I'd leave you. I pulled her into my arms. I don't want anyone else. I only want you. Her body trembled against mine, and before I knew it, we were kissing, her lips fierce and demanding. She pulled me towards the bedroom, and everything after was a blur of passion and longing. But in the back of my mind, the image she'd painted of herself in another man's arms lingered. And it wasn't entirely unwelcome. The room was dark except for the faint light spilling through the curtains. Becky lay beside me, her breathing heavy and content, but my mind raced with everything that had been said. The image of her with another man replayed in my head, no longer something foreign or terrifying, but something I couldn't stop thinking about. I turned toward her, my hand finding her back. Her skin was warm under my touch, and when I leaned in, pressing my lips to her shoulder, she stirred slightly, half asleep but still responsive. Her voice was soft, vulnerable. Steve, what are you thinking? I hesitated, feeling my heart pound against my chest. Should I say it? It was already out there, this unspoken desire lurking between us. There was no going back. I'm thinking about what you said. About the idea of you with someone else. Her breath caught, and I felt her stiffen slightly. I couldn't tell if it was from excitement or fear, or maybe a little of both. You really mean that? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You're not just saying it to make me feel better? I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling. I don't know. I mean, part of me hates the idea. But then another part of me, I paused, the words sticking in my throat. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop imagining it. She was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she turned toward me, her face just inches from mine in the dim light. Her eyes searched mine, and there was something unreadable in them, something darker, more intense than I'd seen before. I've been thinking about it too, she admitted, and the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. I never thought I would, but after talking to Sally, I started to wonder. What would it feel like? What would it do to us? I swallowed hard. And? She reached for my hand, lacing her fingers with mine. I love you, Steve. I love you more than anything. But there's a part of me that's curious. About what it would be like with someone else. About what it would be like to do that, with your blessing. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but there was something electrifying about them too. The idea of her exploring that desire, of giving herself to someone else while knowing she still belonged to me. It was dangerous. It was exhilarating. I want you to be happy, I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. If this is something you need. I don't know, Becky. Maybe we can try it. Maybe I could. Before I could finish the sentence, she kissed me, cutting off my words with a fierce intensity. Her hands tangled in my hair as she pressed herself against me, and I could feel the urgency in her touch, the way her body moved in response to the raw honesty between us. When she finally pulled away, her breath was shaky. You really mean it? I nodded, feeling my pulse race. I don't know how it'll work. I don't know what it'll do to us. But yeah, if this is something you want, if this is something we need to explore, then I'm willing to try. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she kissed me again, softer this time, more tender. I love you, Steve, she whispered against my lips. I love you so much. For a moment, everything felt right. But there was a part of me, a small part, that couldn't help but wonder, what would happen once we crossed that line? Would we ever be the same? The next day passed in a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere, constantly returning to the conversation we'd had the night before. I wondered if Becky was thinking about it too, if she was picturing herself with another man the way I was picturing it. And if she was, what was she feeling? Was she excited? Nervous? Scared? When I got home that evening, she was waiting for me, a glass of wine in hand, a soft smile playing on her lips. But there was something different about her, something I couldn't quite place. How was work? She asked, her tone casual, but her eyes were intense. Fine, I said, my throat dry. How was your day? She shrugged. Uneventful. But I've been thinking about last night. My heart skipped a beat. Yeah? She set her glass down on the counter, walking over to me slowly, deliberately. I think, if we're really going to do this, maybe we should talk about what it looks like. What we both want. I swallowed hard, my palms suddenly sweaty. Okay. What do you think? She stood in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, feel the heat radiating from her skin. I want you to be involved. I don't want this to be something that happens behind your back. If we're going to explore this, I want you to be a part of it. To know everything. To be there. My breath caught. You mean, you want me to watch? She nodded, her gaze never leaving mine. I want you to see me with him. I want you to see what it does to me. What it does to us. The thought sent a thrill of fear and excitement through me, and I couldn't stop myself from picturing it, Becky, with another man, her body moving under his touch, her eyes locked on mine as I watched. It was a dangerous, intoxicating idea, one that scared me as much as it turned me on. I don't know if I could handle that, I admitted, my voice barely audible. She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. You don't have to decide right now. But I want you to think about it. About what this could be for us. It doesn't have to be just about me. It can be about both of us. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. And, if I say yes? What happens then? Her smile was soft, but her eyes were dark with desire. Then we see where it takes us. In the weeks that followed, the tension between us grew. It was subtle at first, small touches, lingering looks, whispered conversations late at night. But as time went on, the anticipation became unbearable. We were both thinking about it, both imagining what it would be like when the moment finally came. And then, one night, Becky came to me, her eyes bright with excitement, her voice breathless. I have something to tell you. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. What is it? She bit her lip, looking almost shy. I've been talking to someone. Someone who might be interested. My throat tightened. Interested? She nodded. In me. In us. The room seemed to tilt, and I felt my pulse quicken. Who is he? Her smile was slow, sensual. His name is Dillon. He's from my gym. I swallowed hard, the reality of the situation hitting me full force. This was really happening. We were really doing this. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. I'm sure. But only if you are. I looked into her eyes, seeing the excitement there, the desire. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I nodded. I'm sure. The next few days passed in a haze, a mixture of excitement and anxiety coursing through me. Every time I looked at Becky, I could see the same tension building in her. The unspoken promise of what was to come loomed large between us, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Becky broke the silence. Dillon wants to meet this weekend, she said, her voice calm but her eyes betraying her excitement. My heart skipped a beat. This weekend? The words felt heavy, final. She nodded, curling her legs under her, looking at me with that mixture of curiosity and hunger I was starting to recognize. He doesn't know everything yet. But I think I want to tell him. I sat back, my mind racing. This wasn't just fantasy anymore. Dillon wasn't some faceless idea, he was real, and soon he'd be with my wife. I should have felt jealousy, anger even, but instead, a strange calm settled over me, tempered by a sense of inevitability. What do you want to tell him? I asked, trying to sound steady. Becky's eyes softened, and she reached out to take my hand. I want him to know the truth. That this isn't just about me. It's about us. About you being part of this, too. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. This was really happening. And, what do you want me to do? She squeezed my hand gently. I want you there, Steve. I don't want to do this without you. I want you to see everything. My stomach twisted. You want me to be there, while you're with him? Her smile was soft, almost shy. Yes. I want you to watch. I want you to see how much I love you, even when I'm with him. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mixture of fear and arousal. It was something I'd never imagined, yet now it felt inevitable. A part of me wanted to back out, to stop this before it went too far, but another part, the part one didn't want to admit, it was too curious, too fascinated by the unknown to resist. I nodded slowly. Okay. I'll be there. Becky's face lit up, her eyes shimmering with excitement. She leaned in and kissed me softly, her lips warm against mine. Thank you, she whispered. I love you so much. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I'd expected. We had planned for a small get-together at our house, under the pretense of a casual evening. But beneath the surface, everything was charged with anticipation. Becky spent most of the afternoon getting ready, and I could see the change in her. There was a spark in her movements, a kind of energy that had been missing before. She dressed carefully, choosing a light, flowing dress that clung to her body in all the right places. Her makeup was subtle but alluring, her lips painted with a deep shade of red that sent my heart racing. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair, she caught my reflection in the glass. What do you think? She asked, her voice light but filled with something deeper. I swallowed, taking in the sight of her. You look beautiful. She smiled, but there was a hint of something else in her expression, anticipation, excitement, maybe even a little fear. I hope he thinks so too. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my nerves. Are you nervous? Becky turned to face me, her expression softening. A little. But more than anything, I'm excited. I've never done anything like this before, but I feel ready. And I want you to be part of it. I took a deep breath, nodding. I want to be part of it too. That evening, Dillon arrived. When I opened the door, I was hit by the sheer reality of it all. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered and confident, with a casual, easy smile that instantly made me feel small in comparison. Becky greeted him warmly, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. It was subtle but unmistakable, a spark of attraction that made my stomach twist. As the night progressed, we made small talk, the three of us trying to keep the conversation light. But underneath it all, I could feel the tension building. Every glance between Becky and Dillon, every accidental touch, sent a shockwave through me. I could see it in their eyes, the unspoken desire building between them, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. At one point, Becky excused herself to get more wine, leaving Dillon and me alone in the living room. The silence between us was thick, and I could feel the weight of what was coming pressing down on me. "So," Dillon said, his voice calm but curious, "Becky's told me a little about what's going on. But I wanted to hear it from you." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What did she tell you?" He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "She said that you're okay with this. That you want her to explore things with me. And that you'll be part of it." The words hung in the air, and I felt my heart race. This was my chance to back out, to put an end to all of this. But as I looked at Dillon, at the way he exuded confidence, the way he seemed so at ease, I realized that backing out wasn't what I wanted. "I'm okay with it," I said, my voice steady but soft. "I want her to be happy. And if this is what she wants, then I'm willing to let it happen." Dillon studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. I respect that." Before I could respond, Becky reappeared, her eyes flicking between the two of us. She could sense the change in the air, the tension that had solidified in her absence. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah. Everything's fine." She returned the smile, but her eyes lingered on Dillon for a moment too long. I felt my chest tighten, but I pushed the feeling down. This was what we'd agreed to. This was what she wanted. Later that night, after the conversation had died down and the wine had made its rounds, Becky stood up, her movements deliberate. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable, and then turned to Dillon. "I think it's time," she said softly. My heart raced, my breath catching in my throat. "Time for what?" Dillon's eyes darkened, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Are you sure?" Becky nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sure." I sat there, frozen, watching as the two of them moved toward the bedroom. Becky's hand reached out, brushing against Dillon's arm, and I felt a pang of something sharp and unfamiliar. Jealousy? Maybe. But there was something else too, something darker, more forbidden. She paused at the doorway, turning back to look at me. "Are you coming?" Her words were a challenge, a test of my resolve. I knew that once I stepped into that room, nothing would ever be the same. But I couldn't turn back now. I stood slowly, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. And then, with a deep breath, I followed them into the bedroom. The air in the room was thick with tension as I stood at the threshold, watching Becky and Dillon move closer. It felt surreal, like I was standing outside my own life, watching it unfold from a distance. Becky glanced back at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anticipation and something deeper, something primal. She pulled Dillon toward her, their lips meeting in a slow, deliberate kiss. My stomach twisted as I watched, but I couldn't look away. This was real. This was happening. And despite the knot in my chest, I was transfixed. Their hands moved over each other's bodies, slow at first, then more urgent. The sound of their breathing filled the room, and I felt my pulse quicken, heat rising in my face as I took it all in. There was no going back now. Becky's dress slid off her shoulders, pulling at her feet. She stood there, bare and beautiful, her body bathed in the dim light. I felt a strange mix of emotions, jealousy, excitement, arousal, all swirling together into something I couldn't quite name. Dillon's hands moved over her skin, and she let out a soft gasp as he pulled her close, his mouth finding her neck. The sight of them together, so intimate, sent a shockwave through me. This was my wife. And yet, in that moment, she was something else, something I could only watch from a distance. Becky's eyes met mine for a brief second, and in that moment, I knew that everything had changed. But whether it was for better or worse, I couldn't yet say. All I knew was that I couldn't turn away. Not now. Not ever. Dillon's hands moved with confidence, tracing every curve of Becky's body. My heart pounded as I stood frozen at the edge of the room, unable to tear my eyes away. I had agreed to this, hadn't I? I had said I would be okay with it, that I wanted to be part of it. But now that it was happening, the reality was almost unbearable. Becky's breath hitched as Dillon's mouth found her neck, his lips pressing against her skin with a hunger that was palpable. She arched her back, her body responding to his touch in ways I hadn't seen in a long time. The way she melted into him, the way she gasped when his hands slid lower, it was as if I wasn't even there. And yet, she didn't forget about me. Her eyes flickered to mine, locking on me with a look that was both sensual and reassuring. In that brief glance, I saw everything, her desire, her need for this, but also her love for me. It was a strange, intoxicating mixture, and though part of me wanted to stop this, another part, the part that had fantasized about this moment, felt a surge of arousal that I couldn't deny. She smiled softly, a look of understanding in her eyes. "Steve," she whispered, her voice breathy and full of emotion, "come closer." I hesitated, my body tense, but something in her tone, in the way she said my name, drew me forward. I stepped closer, my heart hammering in my chest as I approached the bed. Dillon's eyes met mine briefly, a silent acknowledgement that I was part of this too, but his focus remained on Becky. His hands continued their exploration, sliding lower, making her body tremble in ways I hadn't seen in so long. Becky reached out for me, her hand trembling slightly as it found mine. She pulled me toward her, guiding me to sit beside her on the bed. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, the scent of her perfume mixed with the unmistakable scent of her desire filling the air. My head spun, caught between jealousy and arousal, fear and excitement. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "I love you, Steve," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "I want you here with me. I need you to see this, to understand." I swallowed hard, nodding. "I'm here," I whispered back, though my voice sounded distant, almost foreign to me. Dillon moved with practiced ease, his hands sliding over Becky's body with a confidence that made my stomach tighten. He was gentle but firm, guiding her as if he had known her body for years. And in that moment, as I watched them together, I realized something that both terrified and excited me. This wasn't just a fantasy anymore. This was real. My wife was with another man, and I was here, watching, part of it all. Becky's eyes met mine again, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts as Dillon's hands explored her. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice thick with emotion. I nodded, though the truth was, I wasn't sure how I felt. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, but there was no denying the excitement coursing through me. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm okay." She smiled, her hand squeezing mine as Dillon's hands continued to roam over her body. Then, slowly, she turned back to Dillon, her body shifting toward him, her lips parting as she leaned in for another kiss. This one was deeper, more urgent, and I could feel the heat rising between them, the tension building to a point where I knew there would be no turning back. I watched, my breath shallow, as Dillon's hands slid down her back, pulling her closer, pressing her against him. Becky's soft moans filled the room, and I could see her body responding to him in ways that both aroused and unnerved me. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, deeper into the kiss, and I knew then that I was truly a witness to something I could never take back. Becky broke the kiss, her breath ragged as she turned to look at me once more. "Steve. I need you to say it." I blinked, confused. "Say what?" Her eyes were pleading, filled with desire but also with love. "I need you to tell me it's okay. I need to hear it from you." My throat felt tight, my mind spinning, but I knew this was the moment of truth. If I couldn't say it now, this would all fall apart. I had to make a choice, to truly give her what she wanted, or to walk away from this and never look back. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's okay, Becky," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I want you to do this." Her eyes filled with emotion, and she smiled, a soft, loving smile that made my heart ache. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, turning back to Dillon, she kissed him again, this time with even more intensity, more passion. As their kiss deepened, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was happening. My wife was in another man's arms, and I had given her permission. I had opened this door, and now there was no turning back. Dillon's hands moved lower, and Becky's body arched into his touch, her moans growing louder, more urgent. I could see the desire in her eyes, the way her body responded to him, and though part of me ached with jealousy, there was another part, a darker, more primal part, that was fascinated by it all. Becky's hands fumbled at Dillon's shirt, pulling it over his head, revealing his broad, muscular chest. She ran her hands over his skin, her fingers trembling with excitement, and I could see the desire in her eyes, a desire that was for him, and for me, and for this moment. I sat there, watching, my heart racing, my mind spinning, as Dillon's hands moved lower, sliding under the waistband of her panties, pulling them down slowly, deliberately. Becky's breath hitched, her body trembling with anticipation, and I could feel the heat radiating from them both, the electricity in the air thick and heavy. Becky's eyes met mine one last time, and in that moment, I saw everything, her love for me, her desire for Dillon, and the strange, beautiful fusion of the two. She smiled softly, her hand reaching out for me one last time before she turned back to Dillon, fully giving herself over to him. And in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of sensations and emotions. Becky and Dillon moved together with an intensity that was both beautiful and raw, their bodies entwined in a dance that I had never been part of before. I watched them, my heart pounding, my mind spinning, as they explored each other in ways I had never imagined. Becky's moans filled the room, her body trembling as Dillon took her, over and over again, each moment more intense than the last. I could see the way she responded to him, the way her body arched into his touch, the way her eyes glazed over with pleasure. And though part of me ached with jealousy, there was another part, a part one didn't fully understand, that was exhilarated by it all. I sat there, watching, my body tense, my breath shallow, as Dillon moved over her, his hands exploring her body with a confidence that made my stomach twist. Becky's moans grew louder, more urgent, and I could see the way her body responded to him, the way her fingers dug into his back as he moved inside her. And through it all, I was there, a silent witness to the raw, primal connection between them. When it was over, when the intensity had finally ebbed, Becky turned to me, her eyes soft and full of emotion. She reached for me, pulling me close, her body trembling as she whispered, "I love you, Steve. I love you so much." I kissed her, my heart full, my mind spinning. And in that moment, I knew that, though everything had changed, though we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, we were still us. We were still Steve and Becky, and nothing, not even this, it could take that away. But as I lay there, holding her, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? What would this mean for us, for our future? And could we truly navigate this new world we had stepped into? Only time would tell.